Hello everyone, I'm back again with another video and this time it's Bucciarati's costume. If you're new here, I'm Mendokichi and I do cosplays and make my own costumes. You can check out my Instagram for more cosplay updates. I decided to do a gender bend cosplay for Bruno Bucciarati, so I changed the pants into a skirt and also covered up a bit of the chest area. This is probably the most difficult costume I've made so far. There's not a lot of reference online on how I can make my own costume. So I hope this video helps you guys to have a reference if you ever decide to make a DIY of Bucciarati's costume. For this costume, you will need 3 to 4 yards of white suiting fabric, 2 to 3 yards of lining fabric, 8 metal zippers, 1 hoodie zipper, a black acrylic paint for textile, a paintbrush, and a matte acrylic finish. I also used acrylic pen markers, so yeah. So we're starting this tutorial with another basic bodice pattern. I made a new one since I left my old one back home. The link on how to do this pattern is on the description box below. This pattern that I used has darts on the shoulders for both the front and the back side. I made a mock-up to check if the pattern fits me, and it does. I'm quite lucky that I didn't need to adjust anything on the pattern. Now I'm just marking out the heart-shaped detail on the chest area. Then I fixed the drawing. I made sure that this part won't overlap with the shoulder darts. This already looks good to me, so I traced the basic bodice pattern into a manila paper. This is how the back pattern looks like after I added the length to my pattern. I also added an extra dart that goes from the waist to the hips. And this is the front pattern. I divided the side of the pattern into 2 parts, the center front and the side front. I separated them where the darts were originally located. I also made this heart-shaped pattern for the coat lapel. I'm calling it lapel since it's kind of similar to a coat lapel. This is called the extended cap sleeves, and I'll put the link for the tutorial in the description box. I also made a pattern for the collar, which will be a Mandarin style collar. Oh, and this was my setup. The room is super messy. We're still fixing the house. But basically, this room became a storage area and the lights are broken, so I can only work on this costume during the day. I haven't fixed any of my stuff yet, so yeah. So I cut out the pattern in my lining fabric and sewed it to see if the fit is good. I have no more extra fabric, so I decided to do it on my lining instead. The fit was already good to go, so I can proceed with cutting the main fabric. So I actually took out the lining for the sleeves after because the top was just too hot to wear. Yep, I need to jam with Taylor Swift before I cut the fabric. Here are the pieces for the sleeves. I marked out the points where this part should meet this part. I'm using a washable pen to mark this, so I also cut out a slit to mark where the front side of my sleeves are. So I already mapped out parts that I need to cut on my fabric, and I just realized I don't have enough fabric for the skirt. So I'm gonna have to buy again for the skirt. But anyways, I'm just gonna finish up the top first and then I'll do the skirt later on. It's pretty easy to do, so yeah. So that was Borns. I also marked out the darts of the back side of the pattern. So this is where I am going to sew the darts. These are the front pieces of my pattern. So these are the front center pattern and the front side patterns. So I'm just gonna sew them together on this side and that side, and I'm gonna leave the center open. Also, I'm gonna paint these details on the top after I sew this but before I sew it with the lining. I already pinned the darts and I'm just gonna sew this part. Also for the front pieces, I pinned them together so I can sew them now. I actually forgot that for this part, I'm gonna add a zipper in between these two patterns. So I'm just gonna mark out how long I want my zipper and then I'm gonna start sewing there. And then I'm gonna leave that part unsewed. So these are the zippers that I'm going to use, and oh my god, my sitting positions are 100% the reason for my back pains. Now, I'm ironing the seams of the front patterns so that I can sew my zippers flat. I folded my seam allowance on where I will place the zippers, and now it's time to pin them. I made sure to pin the zipper in the center first, and then opening it up to pin each side into the fabric. Now I'm just gonna sew on top of it like how you would normally sew a zipper. After sewing the zippers on both sides of the front part, I went ahead and painted the details on the fabric. So I marked out circles on where I would paint the details. I'm using this textile paint that I got online. This is the cheapest that I found and it does the job pretty well. So I don't see the point in buying expensive brands. My only problem is the paint doesn't spread well. So I have this pretty rough edges. I also made this stencil so that I can make even sizes and to make my work faster. This actually helped a lot and it was super easy to use. I just dabbed the paint over, making sure not to add too much paint or it will bleed through the paper stencil. Ta-da! It looks so cute. Not perfect, but it works. So good job. I repeated this process until I covered everything. Done with the back side, so I'm letting it dry, and also with the sleeves. So I'm just gonna let all this dry up. I also made 3 stencils because the paint kinda smudged through the paper once I've used it for a lot of times. So the paint already smudged into my fabric and that's why I made more stencils. So I'm gonna try to clean up the edges. I also thought of covering my mistakes with this white acrylic paint, but the paint doesn't match my fabric, so I'll just let it go. Next is, I decided to paint a zipper in the backside of my top. So I copied the measurement of my zippers to make the fake one. I made sure that the lines would meet at the center. Then the width of the fake zipper is at 5 mm or half a centimeter. After lining it up, I painted the inside using a fabric marker. The ink bleeds a lot, so I placed a paper towel under the fabric. I used this metallic fabric marker. Super cheap, but I wouldn't recommend it. It doesn't look gold, it's more on the brassy side, but I guess I could work with it. After marking the inside with this gold paint, I drew some lines using a pen to mimic the zipper teeth. And then I used the black fabric marker to add the zigzag detail and some shadows. After that, I covered everything that I painted with an acrylic matte finish. This came from the store where I got my paint, so yeah. I applied a thin layer and let it dry completely. After drying it, I ironed the painted areas to seal in the paint. I covered the fabric with a paper towel and then ironed on top of it. It's already dark, but I really wanted to finish that part, so please bear with me. Make sure to iron each part for at least 5 minutes. Next, I added the zipper on the sleeves. From the shoulder point, I measured 3 inches, and from that, I measured 10 centimeters. This will be the length of my zipper, and yes, I use both inches and centimeters because I'm in the Philippines.
I'm sorry, what?
Then I cut it out on the fabric. I folded and ironed the cut so that I can pin my zipper under it. I did the same on the other sleeves and then sewed on top of the zipper. Now I'm just gonna sew the front and back pieces together, right sides facing each other. Next is sewing the sleeves. First is to sew these together and then sewing it on the curved part. So this is how it looks. Now I just folded the sleeves, right sides facing together to sew along the sides. These are the sleeves now. It's time to attach it on the bodice. This is the part that I've been dreading, sewing the lapel. So I started with sewing this part and then I placed the lining and the main fabric, right sides facing each other, and sewed along the sides. I left a gap for the zipper, marked it out, and then sewed it in between the lining and the main fabric. I wasn't sure if I was doing the right way in sewing this, but basically I just lined my lining fabric and my main fabric together, right sides facing each other, and then sewed along the edges. Next is sewing the collar. I cut out slits on where I will attach the zippers, then I'm just sewing on top like so. I added the other piece with no slit and sewed them together. I flipped it inside out and sewed on top to flatten it. Now to attach it on the bodice. I turned the bodice inside out and inserted the collar on the neckline, sewed it in place and then pulled it inside out again. This is what it looked like. Then I just need to fix the lapel by cutting slits on the curved parts and ironing it flat. I also attached the armhole of the lining with the armhole of the main fabric. I've already removed the lining of the sleeves in this part, so I'm just going to attach the armhole with the armhole of the main fabric. I added this hook to secure the collar and the main zipper. I just hand sewed this part. I also sewed the bottom hem by folding both the main fabric and the lining inside and then sewing them on top. Lastly is for the sleeve cuffs. I added a bell sleeve detail on the cuffs. I did so by cutting a circular pattern. I pinned the zipper on the inside of the circle and then sewed it in place. And then I top stitched it. And then finishing the hem. I pinned it on the sleeves like so and then sewed it using my machine. Hi everyone, the first part of this video is done and I've already showed you how I sewed and painted the top part of this costume. For the next video, I'll show you how I made the accessories for the cosplay and also the skirt. So stay tuned for the next video. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Bye!